different from counselling. Before we go on to that, I just want to ask a question. Do you dream in words or pictures?
Pictures.
Pictures. Yeah. Sometimes with a running script, but we're all agreed that, you know, when you go into sleep and you're in an undefended, often unconscious state, it's pictures that bubble up from the depths of your unconscious, if you want to see it in a Jungian way. So to me, as an art therapist, that illustrates that we store a lot of our experience visually and through images. But as counsellors, you're learning to work with words. You know, people say, "How are you?" You know, and we say, "I'm fine." You know, we know they're not fine because their body language tells us differently. Beyond that, though, we also explore words through symbols and in pictures. And I think our dreams illustrate that a lot of our fears, our hopes, our aspirations, our desires that we're not even in touch with come up in a visual form. So that suggests that we can also access that material through a visual form. And that is really the basis of art therapy. So what art therapy is, it's a form of therapy or counselling that uses visual images, much more so than words, and what we call the creative process, the journey of making those images as a form of self-expression, exploration, healing and counselling. Very important as well that it's the process of making these images that is therapeutic, not just the end product. I have a lot of people who come up to me and say, "What does this picture mean? You know, can you show me the person's soul from this picture?" Particularly anxious parents who've had children who've done sort of axemen and heads rolling off, and they wonder if their child needs therapy. And I'll always say, "Well, tell me, how was it made? Tell me about the person who made it. When they were making that image, what sense did you get from their body language, from the sort of your intuition in the room? Were they happy when they made it, or was there a lot of anxiety? When they'd made it, was there relief? Or did you feel that there was fear when they made it?" So it's the process, not just the picture, not just the end product. Yeah, and that's very important. And it's through the process of exploring this that people are able to explore emotions and gain insights. And this will hopefully become a bit more clear as we go through the exercises in a minute. The other important thing is that it's within the context of the therapeutic relationship. So it's not just the artwork, it's the therapeutic relationship, the three-way relationship. I'm going to illustrate that a bit more in a minute. Actually, maybe I'll illustrate it now. So you're training here as a counsellor, and then either your child or your client, and you're working with words primarily, yeah? You've explored, I'm sure, transference and countertransference, yeah? So they go that way. As soon as you add an art medium, you have far more pathways of communication. The transference and countertransference happens onto the art image as well. Now, I mean, I find this very exciting working in an Asian context. I've worked in Asia for 10 years now. And particularly when there's issues of face and there's hierarchical expectations of, you know, what you can say, it's actually much easier to put particularly negative, maybe aggressive feelings out here, because it doesn't damage this relationship. Yeah, there's not so much face. The anger is still expressed here. It's looked at and explored, but it's not so confrontational. It's not so direct. It's out there. It's seen as other. It's looked at, processed, worked with, but it's not so directive. And that's one of the key reasons I think art therapy in lots of contexts is really helpful. It grew out in the UK, and I'm from the UK, it grew out to the mental health field. In the States, it grew out in the 1940s from the special education field. Increasingly now it's used in self-development, counselling. I've used it in the drug and alcoholic field, special needs with the elderly. It's used in cancer care. It's, you know, wherever you find counsellors across the world, you're now finding art therapists, because people have appreciated how working non-verbally can often really help people process things that are sometimes too painful to say. What art therapy is not, it's not teaching people to draw. You don't need to be a great artist. Actually, I've worked with artists and non-artists as patients in my mental health work over the years, and often it's the artists who are harder to work with because they have a strong aesthetic sense and they want a good end product. So it's sometimes quite hard to get them to just go with process, whereas if people don't have that expectation, they're more able to freely express and explore. And it's also not drawing pictures for people to analyse. So it's going back, it's not the end product. Oh, because the house is there, it means this person has got this issue. I have a lovely story about analysing pictures that I heard years and years ago of a psychologist who was working with a little girl who had quite a few emotional and behavioural problems in England. And he asked her to draw a picture of a house and a person. Now, some of you will be familiar with the house-person-tree psychological test. So she drew this picture, and the psychologist looked at it and got very, very worried and was talking later to the mother about it. Said, I'm very concerned about your daughter because she's drawn her house and she's drawn it on legs. And I get a sense that she doesn't feel grounded and that emotionally she's quite vulnerable. Also, her house doesn't have, the windows are all open and there's no curtains in the windows. And he said, you know, she obviously feels exposed here. And her trees are spiky and look, you know, again, non-grounded. And this was the thing he was very concerned about. And the mother looked at him a bit queerly and said, but she grew up in Malaysia. These are what the houses are like over there. So you have to be very careful about analysing end products. You need to know some of the story and test it against the story. Also, the idea that art therapy is not a tool for diagnosis, but rather a tool for self-awareness and building a therapeutic relationship and taking a creative journey. Having said that, I've been working in the creative arts for nearly 24 years now. And I can sometimes now look at an artwork and think, it looks like somebody who might have a psychosis. There are some patterns in art making where you see, or I can see if a child has a cognitive dysfunction because of the way they make artwork. So neurology affects the way you make artworks as well. But you always have to test many hypotheses before you know the clear answer. Anyone who's worked with me before will have this quote, and I'm just in the process of designing my website, and this will be one of the key quotes that appears on my website because it's something I believe very passionately, that it's through creativity that the individual discovers the self. And we're going to look a little bit after the break at the work of Donald Winnicott and early childhood frameworks. They're quite psychodynamic psychotherapy frameworks. But why creativity matters, why is it important? And how does it impact on self and self-development, our own understanding and the clients we work with? And we're going to look at that. Okay, so how does art therapy help? This is just a précis, and there are many more ways which I hope to go on and illustrate. It stimulates imagination and creativity. It gives people a language to express things that are often very difficult to discuss verbally. And this comes back sometimes, you know, to anger. How can you tell your counsellor, who is an older woman with children, like your mother maybe, that actually, you know, you've got this hate towards older women who represent mothers? And yet you know it's something that needs to be done. You can do it out through this way. Or increasingly, as I work with clients, I don't actually talk about what they create. I watch that change and resolution and transformation happens just through the process of making artwork. And it's really helpful actually to get a feel of where a lot of you are working, because I have an option of showing you 2 case histories at the end of today, and I think I'll probably show the 11, 12-year-old child. There's a lot of you involved in youth or schools rather than the older case conference. And that will illustrate that a bit more. I also think, and I hope through the exercises you'll do today, that you'll get understanding of yourself through some of the very simple exercises we're going to do. And it also builds confidence in about being who you are. And I'm going to talk about why children play again after the break, and hopefully that will put in context why working symbolically and creatively is important for building confidence. Also, it provides a non-threatening, play-focused environment where issues can be explored through symbols. So going back to, we don't always need to talk through things. Some of you work with youth, and those of you at one of you is at a family service.